All right, welcome to this video. Today, I'm going to be going through how we turned 70K into 16 million in sales with our e-commerce business. And so 70K is obviously the initial investment that we put into our business to fund it, to get it going. And then the 16 mil is what we've been able to actually achieve over the years in total sales. So we're going to be going through that today, and hopefully by the end, you'll have our key strategies as to how we've been able to do that. Before we get underway, along with our e-commerce business that we actually currently run, we do help other e-commerce businesses with their growth. And so this is one of the things that we've discussed in our program and our mentoring. And so if you're serious about your e-commerce growth, book in a time below, join the Facebook group, and it'd be great to have a chat about it. But for now, let's jump into it. And so in the beginning, we basically had decided to put a portion of money into our business to get it off the ground, as a lot of business owners do. We're calling it now, it doesn't seem like there was a lot of calculation behind putting in 70K into the business, but I think my brother, who was our business partner with an accounting background, had certainly put some numbers behind what we needed the money for. But 70K with a business that we were actually starting in terms of rolling out cold pressed juice cleansers to our clients, our customers, seems a bit of a random number, and especially when we take into account, one of our first major expenses. And so when we started the business, we put in the 70K, we had that in savings from our corporate jobs. So we put that straight into a business bank account, open that up. And we obviously started to, register our business, register the website, pay for those little nitty gritty things that you need to get off the ground. But in terms of an actual plan, we didn't necessarily have every dollar allocated to each expense, whether it be production or marketing or anything like that. It was just kind of this lump sum sitting in our account. Obviously, things would come up, but nothing to the degree of, massively expense. And so the first real thing that actually came up was when we decided to, basically say, yes, this has got legs, this is what we want to do, and we're going to absolutely give it our best shot, was we invested 30K US at the time into a big commercial cold pressed juice machine straight from the US. So it was going to take a few months to get here. It was going to cost us 30K US, so 35 to 40K AUD, which basically there goes most of our budget, plus all these things, and we conservatively planned, but plus things like import taxes and import agents and all these things. So suddenly, our allocation of cash has gone from 70 to, drop 45 from that, and you've got, what's that, 25K. That was where the big chunk of our investment initially went. And so the decision behind this is some of the principles that we've adopted all the way through our business to be able to grow that. But if you use that instance in isolation at that point in time, dropping 45K on a machine, that a business that hasn't even started yet. We've had a few customers, a few clients, of course, which we had produced juice for literally from our kitchen bench. And to go and drop that much cash I wouldn't say on a whim, but on, not much revenue back in the door, it was a massive decision. Obviously, hindsight, it was the best decision we ever could have made, but there was some thought process we went through, which, as I say, has stuck with us through this day. It wasn't just like, oh yeah, we took a risk and it paid off. It was the actual thought process and the principles that we put behind our decision-making, particularly financial decision-making, that really put us in good stead. Okay. So that is, as I say, a big chunk of our actual capital that went to the machinery, which, as I say, it's never just, this is the cost, it's the extras, it's the importing, it's all that sort of thing. And then the rest of the cash really just flowed, really enabled us to cash flow the business essentially on a weekly basis. The way we had priced our or set up our business model was it was a prepaid mechanism, but that didn't mean that we could get cash from people, go and buy, the bottles and produce and packaging, in time, like as in just in time. It was, of course, pre-purchased that we had to go and do that. We did purchase at the time our fresh veggies and produce for sure, but our packaging, we obviously had to prepay. So the majority of that cash basically went to those things, funding the business on a weekly basis. And to be really honest, you know, we were cutting a lot of weeks fine in terms of our cash flow. But as I say, we could see small incremental growth in our sales, in our profit margins, which weren't actually that big at that point in time. We were trading off, and this is a recommendation to anybody who's starting out, we were trading off our margins for convenience and time. Okay, so where I'll relate this to is essentially, you know, buying something domestically, as in we were buying our bottles domestically in smaller batches, which was more expensive than if we bought 1 million from Alibaba, for example. But it gave us time because we could just go out there and get them. And it gave us flexibility in that we didn't have to spend that much to buy 1 million bottles, and we didn't have to store that many bottles. And so we were trading our margins for time at that point in time, and risk. Obviously, you know, you go and commit to 1 million bottles, there's huge risk of carrying that stock versus, okay, you know, if we're left with 30 bottles at the end, that's, you know, that's fine. That's manageable. We haven't blown everything. So that's what helped us to manage our cash flow. But as I say, that was kind of where our cash was going at that point in time. Okay. So just to give you a bit of a timeline, we put the cash in at the beginning, the 70K. And within 3 months, we had figured out that we wanted to purchase this big machine. So 3 months, yeah, we learned a lot during that period of time, but we obviously had the conviction and the market feedback to then make that huge commitment. Okay, so from there, as I said, it was kind of, you know, cash flow was pushing and pulling. We invested in some, you know, refrigeration and other sort of machines that we kind of needed, whether it was stovetop kind of things or just more machines or more jugs or just real production things more than anything. And so as time went on, I'll just pull up this chart. That was in the beginning. That was obviously our planning and our expenditure. We really didn't have a whole lot more than that. In terms of advertising, that might be a question that people come up with. You know, a lot of people come to us and say, I've got, you know, I haven't started my business, but I've got 50K allocated to marketing in the first, you know, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. We hadn't allocated anything specifically to marketing. We had a very vague strategy, and we were kind of like super raw to this sort of thing. Even social media, we were really raw to that. And so that wasn't a high priority for us at the time. In hindsight, that's probably something we could have changed. But hindsight comes with obviously wisdom and experience. And we didn't necessarily have the conviction that we have in our product now. Of course, if you're going to know it's going to be as successful as it's been, you'd throw $1 million into it in the first year. But we just obviously didn't have that. But then again, going back to our cash conservation, that's exactly what we had learned. Okay, so that was basically the first, call it, couple of years. Honestly, we were just kind of going week to week. We were incrementally growing. We were making small decisions around spending more on things and spending less on things. And it was kind of a lot of plug and play, which we now have knowledge about, that you can really make decisions quickly. But there were 3 pivotal strategies that we used to really grow the business to the extent that it was. Okay, so I'll just see if I can get this here. I'll select. Yep. Okay, so the first one was, you know, I just briefly mentioned it then, cash conservation. Okay, cash conservation. So this was really only spending money that we had to. Really only spending money that we had to. We didn't have any fat in the margins or in our bank account to be able to spend money unnecessarily. And so probably the best example to use is, yes, certainly in a marketing sense, but with our production, our actual resources. So as I mentioned before, the bottles, that's probably the best example we can give you. Not, you know, just to get the profit margins from the beginning, is outlaying more cash and committing more to a business or an idea or a supplier even, then you've actually got customers ready to go. Okay, so literally I was driving out, you know, to the outer suburbs near the airport every couple of weeks to get more bottles because we needed it. We were getting busier, but at the point in time, to conserve our cash, we weren't outlaying as much until we had the cash in the bank, and then we'd go buy more. We get a bit more cash in the bank, we'd buy, a third or twice as more next time. And that's how we cash flowed our business. So we're really conserving the cash, because one of the biggest mistakes that we see businesses make is that they blow all their cash. A client came to us not so long ago, and they had spent about $20,000 on Facebook ads over a 4 or 5 month period, and their returns were well below par. They had been burning cash in ads, and that was purely because they had the money and they felt that that was the best way to utilize it. But because they had the money, they could spend it, versus if you don't have the money, you're very, very picky about how you can actually use it. And this is a topic for another time, but when we speak about getting investment from outside sources, a question we used to ask ourselves, well, what would we do with that cash? And a lot of the time it wasn't, oh, we'll just pump, marketing, or pump it here or pump it there. There are definitely avenues and the advantages of having extra capital, but it was almost by necessity that we conserved our cash. And this is the mentality that you actually have to have. You need to really understand where it's going and what payoff it's going to get from it. And there's going to be wastage, of course, but using your cash wisely and conservatively is the number one thing that actually got us through essentially those first couple of years. As I say, we were successful, we were making sales, but we weren't making millions, and therefore we still had to conserve our cash in those early days. Now it's different. You trade your money for time. So we're testing, we're always utilizing things. We'll try this, we'll try that to see if it works. But in the beginning, absolutely cash conservation is king. The second thing is what we call the 10x rule. And so similar to cash conservation, the 10x rule means that in the way of operating expenses. And so with machinery, for example, we use this. If we won't get or can't foresee getting a 10x benefit from that expenditure, then we won't invest in it. We haven't grown enough yet, or haven't got that demand yet. So this came into play, particularly with machinery and premises. Okay, so we went from, as I say, our kitchen bench to commercial kitchen renting by the hour, to some restaurants, basement, basically, to other locations. And we only made those decisions to move, if it wasn't out of necessity, which a few of them were, when we could see that we were growing into that space and would 10x our return for that investment, right? And so we had basically, we outgrew every location we went to. And the next one we moved to, we were going to 10x that. The next one we're going to move to, 10x that. Until eventually we had to basically create a customized kitchen, which we're currently operating out of now, where we've basically taken over so much space that, we need to get another one. And this, again, has put us in really good stead. Not moving, and it ties into number one, not moving or making decisions cash related before you've got the benefit. And this also comes into staffing, right? So not hiring staff or employees too early, or contractors too early, until you can see that they are going to 10x what you're spending on them or on that particular thing. So this is a really important rule, and you're never going to get it 100% correct. We acknowledge that. But if you've got a pretty good idea, you're looking for that 10x, right? If it's just going to 1 and 2x your results, your growth and your sale, then you're not ready. You have to do other things. You have to trade your time for that money until you can actually get that rolling. Okay. And then the third thing is incrementally improving margins. Okay. So this is what we spoke about just a little bit earlier, where originally we weren't super profitable. We were profitable, but not as profitable as we could be or should be. I can't remember the specific margins, but we were probably running at, our cost of goods, we would call it, where our cost of goods right now are probably 30 to 40%. Our cost of goods back then were probably, 60 to 70%. Right. So, double or more what they are right now. And so that that really got in the way of us growing our cash flow quicker. But as I said, it really gave us that flexibility, which is almost as important as your cash flow at that point in time, to be able to make decisions quicker, to get stock quicker. You know, a massive problem at the moment is getting shipping, you know, logistics, getting things shipped, and also the cost trade-off for that. It's massively expensive. And so these all tie in together, your cash conservation, your 10X rule. We didn't start looking overseas or anywhere else for our supply of our bottles and our bags and our packaging. We get everything as much as possible locally. We can, but there's literally some things that we just can't. And then when you get big enough, you obviously have to do your numbers on the margins for things. And so it was only when we were big enough that we could start to incrementally improve our margins and become more profitable. So one of the first things that we did was obviously the machinery. So that was make it a lot quicker for us to produce more and more, so we could increase our capacity, you know, our sales, our capacity. The next thing would have been buying bottles in you know, pallets rather than literally just boxes. The next thing would kind of be our like marketing material in terms of our, you know, flyers and information within the cleanse packs, and then, you know, cooler bags, and then eventually bottles, right? And still, there's still things to grow to increase the margins. But every time you can get those economies of scale, you are increasing your margins, and obviously the volumes is negotiating power. So a recommendation that we always tell our clients is don't necessarily worry about this right off the bat. Of course, get things ready, get things prepared and in the door, but over time you can incrementally improve your margins. It's not worth the headache and the time and the effort and I guess the disappointment with looking, you know, internationally or whatever to be able to get things at really high margins if you're not even making the sales on the front end. Just get it done quickly and get that validation, and then start working on incrementally improving your margins. As long as you are essentially like profitable in the beginning, that's obviously number one. You know, don't do something that's not profitable. But in terms of creating like the perfect business model straight out of the gates, that's just time wasting. Okay, so that is something we're continually working on. You know, as well as, you know, we spoke about volume and things like that. This is like something that just came to mind was our produce. You know, buying honey in bulk, buying, you know, celeries in bulk. Like, we didn't obviously stop going to the market a couple of years in, but that's another thing that massively increased our margins, buying at scale. And that's the thing that you can work on as well. And so those are the three main things that helped us build. I promise you, those simple things, that decision making that's come through from the start to the very, well, where we are now. It's not the end, but from the start until where we are now, and that will carry us through. Okay, so those three principles have really enabled us to turn our 70K investment, really it was like, you know, 25 with obviously the machine thrown in there, into over 16 million sales so far. And so we obviously feel that this has kept us in good stead. We've been able to incrementally grow with those cash conservation and 10X rules in mind. And that's something that you can use in your business to be able to do the same. You know, ask yourself questions around why you need to buy something. You know, what return are you going to get on that investment? Ask yourself questions around if something is really necessary. And if you have that attitude, whether you've got, you know, $1 million in the bank or not, it's going to carry through. Those principles are going to carry you through. You know, we often speak about, you know, not penny pinching, and that's the things that you can really go 10X on, is spend nothing on things that don't matter. Spend as much as you need to on things that do and are going to get you that return. Okay. And so, look, I really hope that was valuable. This is something that we've been discussing in amongst ourselves, but also with our clients. And it cannot be underestimated how you manage your cash, because it's literally the difference between sinking or swimming, you know, succeeding and going out of business, and how long your cash flow runway actually is. So look, hope that helps. Any questions, let me know. And I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks.